third installment in our series Reading and the Life of the Mind. And what we have done in the past two lectures, I've tried to show you I've tried to lay my foundation, showing you that reading is essential to the life of the mind. And what I've done in the past two lectures, I've shown you what it means, what reading is about, and what it means to read. And if you've gone through the I've posted just one lecture notes. If you've read through the lecture notes, I think that should aid you in this class. And for announcement, uh, the this lecture series is based on my new book, Deep Reading: How to Engage Your Mind in a Book. I really want you to get this book if you've not gotten it. It's foundational to what everything I'll be teaching, everything I've taught, and everything I'll be teaching in this lecture series. So let us go into what today's lecture is about. Today's lecture is about the power of thinking. I want to show you what it means to truly read as much as you should read, and to show you that thinking is essential to the life we want to live. Now, among many important benefits from reading good books is the stimulus to think more clearly about life and the world around us. Our life, as I've said in diverse ways and in different platforms, if you follow me across my social media platform, our life is what our thoughts makes of it. The life we live and the way we navigate in the world is owing to thoughts. And I've preached this thing again and again. It is not just that we think, it is not just that we think, but how we think those thoughts. Because thinking is not enough. You thoughts are not enough. I mean, to think, like think thoughts, it's not enough. What makes the biggest difference in our lives is how we think those thoughts. And that is what today's lecture is about. And I want you to be attentive. I want you to open your mind to understand. And I want you to pay attention to the fact that whatever I say, it will aid you in your own thinking. And it is my hope that by the end of this lecture, your minds are open to understand the power of thinking. Now, thinking is such a broad concept that it can mean anything we do with our mind. But my main concern in this lecture is how thinking relates to our pursuit of knowledge and truth as a means of living the life we all want. Now, the core premise behind today's lecture is thinking is the rarest human activity. To think, in my own opinion, is divine. To think is divine. So, like I said, it is not just that you think, but how you think that makes the difference. Because most of because most of what passes for thinking is borrowed ideas with borrowed ideas, one from diverse materials or the things we have heard from people. That is, it has been repeated until it feels like our own thoughts, but essentially they are people's opinion. If we want to navigate this life, if we want to live the life we want to the fullest, then we have got to own our thoughts. It's not that it's not that people forming your own thoughts, it's not that it's bad. It is not. But you come to that point where your mind is, quote and unquote, it's independent. It is not really relying on another person to really come to a conclusion of a matter or a philosophy of life to live the life that you want. So we want to come to that point where we own our mind, we own our thoughts. Because most of what we learn in school, these are there's something called garbage in, garbage out. It comes in and we simply think that this is our own thoughts. Meanwhile, it was actually passed down to us, and we live all our lives without questioning those thoughts. Now, real thought is a discipline. Real thinking is discipline. Thinking is discipline. Thinking is hard mental work. That is my belief. That is something that I believe. Reading is hard mental work. It's hard mental work. It's uncomfortable to really think for yourself and to think ideas that is peculiar to you. It's actually uncomfortable. It is generative act. That is what makes us creators. That is why if you truly want to live a certain kind of life, if you really want to live the life that you want for yourself and maybe even pass down to your children, you have got to become a creator. And when I say creator, I'm talking about your thoughts are independent of any other person, but it is something that you yourself or you originated it, so to speak. Now, when I mean originated, I'm not talking about this thought is nowhere, but that's not what I'm saying. But like I said, you own your mind, you own your thoughts. It's not just something that you receive like recycled opinion of the masses, recycled opinion of the people, but you own your mind. I keep repeating that. You own your mind. So this kind of discipline, this kind of mind, this kind of thought, this kind of thinking life, the life of the mind, it's not something that comes by accident. If you see a truly brilliant, like a genius, somebody that has gone beyond the plane of the ordinary man, that person has cultivated his mind. That person has cultivated his mind, and that is the place you want to be, where you have cultivated your mind, that you don't think like the masses. You don't think like a peasant. That's one of the words I've been using on my WhatsApp channel. You don't think like the masses. You don't think like a peasant, but you own your thoughts. You own your mind. It's something that it's something that must be chosen. It must be protected, and it must be practiced. So that is what today's lecture is about. Most people have never had an original thought in their lives. Most people. And maybe you're one of them. You've never had an original thought from when you were born and you started understanding yourself and the world and the environment around you. Like, you have not really had an original thought. Maybe that is why you live your life the way you live your life. And most people would never notice that all their life, the things that they think about, from everything, it's something that was essentially passed down to them, and they did not even question it. And the reason is not because they are unintelligent. No, it's not because they are not intelligent, but it's because the condition of modern life are almost perfectly designed to prevent genuine thinking. You go to school, and the school system is designed in a way that everybody thinks alike because everybody is taught the same thing. That is why, to an extent, reading as it ought to be, it's not being taught in school. That is why it is my mission through the School of Books to teach people what it truly means to read and cultivate an independent mind. An independent mind from the system. So the modern life, school life, is designed to keep you in a certain box. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily evil. No, that's not what I'm saying. But it makes you think like everybody else. They teach you the same thing, and to an extent, you're expected to act like everybody else. So we are surrounded by noise, by opinion, by entertainment, by media, and the constant pull of other people's conclusion, other people's opinion, other people's mind. We don't want that. We want to become independent thinkers. We want to own our mind and own our thoughts, because that is how we can truly create the life that we want. And when I say the life that we want, I'm not talking about something that was passed down to you by society. No, it's not something that was passed down to you by society. It's something that you own. You own the thought. You own this dream. This dream, you own it. There's a book we read recently in my book club, a reading life book club, and the book is about the book is about The Alchemist. If you read the book, an interesting book you should read. It the If you read that book calmly and with the mind with which the author wants you to read it, that book would expose your mind to a lot of things that the society kind of it it hides them from the ordinary man to see. But that book should open your mind to a lot of things, a lot of secrets that, when discovered, would actually unlock your life to live the life that you actually want to live. To live the life you want to live. So by the end of this lecture, you should be equipped to become a real thinker. And if there's anything that I'm demanding from you, I'm demanding that you do, is I want you to think. I want you to think. Think. Become a thinker. Now, you don't have to become a philosopher to be a thinker. But if you can, you should. I'm a philosopher. Yeah. That's my field of study. I'm a philosopher. But I want you to be a thinker. Think. Think. Like, really think. Cultivate your mind. And begin by understanding what it actually means to think. So this lecture is divided into 4 parts. So let us take the part 1, or you can call it chapter 1. Chapter 1. The part 1 is what thinking actually is. What does it really mean to think? What does it mean to think? How would you know that you're actually engaging in vigorous thinking that would change the trajectory of your life? How would you know? Now, thinking is not the same as having opinions. Thinking is not the same as having opinions. Everybody have an opinion of something. Everybody have an opinion, but not everybody think, because most of the opinion people have, it was actually passed to them. It was passed down to them by, maybe they read it in a book, or they listened to somebody talk about it, maybe, or a sermon in church or somewhere, I don't know, a podcast. It was passed down to them. So there's a difference between thinking and having an opinion. Now, you can think and come to having your opinion, but you cannot have an opinion and truly think. Understand it. Understand the distinction. Now, thinking is not also the same as processing information. Totally different. Thinking is not the same as processing information, and thinking is not also about reacting to stimuli. When I use the word stimuli, I'm talking about something that is outside of you that stimulates you to think in a certain way. Do you understand? A stimuli, let me repeat myself. A stimuli is something that is outside of yourself that stimulates you, or makes you, propel you, or inspire you, or motivate you to think in a particular way. That is not thinking. Thinking is not reacting to stimuli, right? Now, thinking is specific. Thinking is a specific, disciplined mental activity that most people rarely engage in. So there are three things commonly mistaken as thinking. Three things that is commonly mistaken as thinking. Number one is associating. And many people think when you associate something to the other, it means you're thinking. The mind is moving free in this state, in this state of association or association. It's actually the mind is actually moving freely from one idea to another by feeling or by habit of thought. If there's something that I realized recently, I've always known it, but I realized it recently. There's something called habits of thoughts or habits of thinking. Habits of thinking. Now, habits of thinking means that like there's a pattern to your thoughts. That is why I've come to believe that we don't just think, but we think in a particular pattern. We have a habit of thought, right? We have we have a particular habit, a pattern that with which we think our thoughts. The popular word for it is mental model, a pattern of thinking. So associating is what the mind does by default. Every one of us we associate, right? We move, we connect, we associate ideas together, but that is not what thinking is about. Number two, commonly mistaken things for thinking is reacting. Now, reacting is reacting is forming an immediate response to a stimulus. Something happened, or you listen to a podcast and you're forming an immediate response to that. That is not thinking. That is not thinking. And usually, this kind of immediate response, they are always emotional. They are always emotional, and it is fast, automatic, and largely unreliable. So this is not thinking. It is not thinking. Reacting is not thinking. And third, the third commonly mistaken thing for thinking is reasoning. Though this one is closely related. Reasoning. Now, reasoning is the deliberate, structured movement from premises to conclusion. If you're a philosophy student or you've maybe read about logic, you understand what I mean by moving from premise to conclusion. And if you remember, the first thing I said in this video, one of the first things I said in this video, that the premise of this, so the premise is where the kind of like the launching pad for any idea. It's a launching pad for any idea. So that's why I said reasoning is not thinking, right? It can use it, but it is not, right? It is not. There's a difference between thinking and cognition. Now, the sometimes the many people think these are related, right? Many people think these are related, but they are not. So what's the difference? What's the difference? What's the difference between thinking from cognition? Cognition is goal directed mental processing. Cognition is goal directed mental processing, like solving problems, acquiring information, completing tasks. That is cognition. And we all do that fairly to an extent. If we are engaged in a particular problem, we want to solve it, we engage our mind in this kind of this mental activity. We engage our mind, and so that is one. That is one. Then the difference between thinking and cognition is thinking is the mind tuning itself. Cognition is problem solving, it's goal directed. It's always towards something. While thinking is the mind tuning itself. When you pick up the guitar and you're tuning, I'm a guitarist, I play guitar a little. When you pick up the guitar and you're tuning the guitar to sound in the right tune, or maybe your violin, you're tuning it. That is what thinking is to the mind. You're fine tuning it to sound in a particular way or in the right way. So one of the things cognition do is it processes results, while thinking produces understanding. Cognition produces results. Thinking produces understanding. Right? So most of what we call intellectual life is cognition. You say the person is smart, the person is intelligent. Yeah, but the person might not be a thinker. Yeah, the person might not be like engaging the mind, the life of the mind in the truest sense of the word, thinking. Right. So most of what we call intellectual life is cognition. But genuine thinking is rare and it's more unsettling. So that is why most thoughts, most opinion are not thoughts. It's just a reflex. Most opinion are not thoughts. Because you have an opinion on something doesn't mean that you have a body of thoughts around it. No. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you have a mental like you think in a particular way. It just reflects. Having an opinion is just reflect. Now opinion formed quickly without explanation. Opinion formed quickly without explanation in response to social pressure. It can just evaporate. That is why most of what we hold to be beliefs or to be true, they are just emotionalism, just our emotions. It's just based on what we have been taught in a particular time. That is why one of the best thing you can do for yourself is study philosophy. You study philosophy, yeah. One of the best thing you can do for yourself is to study philosophies, because philosophy will expose your mind to a lot of ideas. Now, of course, it's always good to have bearings and grounds and beliefs. It's always good. Everybody has beliefs one way or the other, whether you know it or not, you have beliefs. But it is just good that you study something, or even if it's not philosophy, just study something outside of your own beliefs, things that you believe to be true. Study something outside of that. It will help you in your mental life. It will help you actually, if you truly believe what you believe and you maybe encounter things that are that are against your own form of beliefs, it will do two things to you. One, it will either sway you away from those beliefs, because in the first place those beliefs were built on emotions without strong foundation. Then the second thing it could do for you is it will actually solidify your beliefs in the it will solidify your beliefs in the things you believe in, right? I remember I had I had an argument with somebody on thread about the existence of God. And one of the things I told the person is, now I love having conversation with people like you, because it helped me question my own faith, examine my own faith, and it helps me to solidify my beliefs. That's it. Because the more you the more you argue against what I believe to be true, and I try to defend it, I try to prove it otherwise, it helps me solidify it, and it strengthens my own thinking process and how I argue. According to Socrates said, an unexamined life, I think he was actually quoting Plato, an unexamined life is not worth living. Many of us are living an unexamined life that are not examined. Many of us. We're living an unexamined life. Many of us. Socrates says that life is not worth living. So you want to question the things you believe to be true. You want to question it. You want to go beyond what you've been taught, the things you've been taught, so that it will not just be an opinion that was passed down to you without you just accepted it, but you went on and you searched for truth to inform your own life, solidify your beliefs, and to make like the things you hold to be true, which shapes how we live our lives. It changes everything. It changes everything. It changes everything. And one of the ways to test now, let us just try something. One of the tests to know if you truly believe something without like you believe it objectively. I'm just using a philosophy term now, objectively and subjectively. Now, let me just clarify. Subjective means when you hear the word subjective in a philosophical context, it means that something is drawn or believed from a personal standpoint. Subjective is subjective. That's why they say that there is something called subjective truth. It's true to you, but it's not true to everybody. Now, then there is what we call objective truth. Objective truth means it is something, it's verifiable truth, something that is outside of you. So if it's true here, it's true everywhere. That's what, at least in layman language or in basic terms, that is what subjective truth is about. So I mean, objective truth is about. So you want to test if what you believe to be true is objective or subjective. Is now, now you can state one of the strongest argument against your own position and try to argue against it. That's when you truly know if what you believe to be true that runs your life, it's not just an opinion that was given to you, but it's something that you yourself you have come to a conclusion of because you see this objective evidence and you say, wow, this thing is true and I'll base my life on this. Our lives, how we live our lives, and our destiny rest upon our thoughts and how we think those thoughts. So it's not enough that you have an opinion or you have beliefs that runs your life, but are these beliefs based on objective realities? Of course, there is a place for subjective realities. Of course, there is a place for that. We all come to that point where we believe something to be true, even if based on experience or something like that. Even if maybe other people don't hold those things, but you know that, oh, this thing is true because I've experienced it. Of course, there is a place for subjective truth. But you don't want to live your life entirely from subjective experiences or subjective truth. You want to live your life from objective truths, because those are the things that actually helps you stand the test of time. Like things will happen to you. It's not just what you believe. It's not just that, oh, I believe these things because it happened to me in the past. So I believe that because it happened to me in the past, it will also happen again. Cannot live your life like that. So if you cannot argue against, or if you cannot argue against and come up with reasonable conclusion to your beliefs, then it means one thing. It means that the things you think that is your thought, they are not your thought, but they were passed down to you, and it was you just accepted it without question. So the difference between a belief that you have inherited and a belief that you earned is just in this. It is not just it has gone beyond the corridors of subjective experiences, but it has come to that point of objective realities. That is what we want. So that's it. Now, the question we want to ask is, now, what is the condition that makes good thinking possible? That is what we want to talk about now. What is the condition that, like, what conditions make good thinking possible? Like I said earlier, thinking does not just happen automatically. Does not just happen automatically. It requires specific conditions, most of which the modern world actively destroys. You go on social media and as you that is why let me stay with my with my notes, with my lecture note. Let me just state my lecture note. I almost diverted. Let me just state my lecture note. All right. So now, one of the things that makes good thinking possible is solitude. Solitude. Now, thinking requires requires the withdrawal of the self from the social field. Like in company, we perform like we are actually alone. You're actually alone. Like we examine our thoughts. We examine our thoughts. Now, one of them. Now, let me go back to what I wanted to say. One of the things that social media doing is doing to us that we are not aware of it is you pick up your phone and you're scrolling. You watch one video before you give yourself room to process what you just watched or learned. You scroll to the next video, and that's how you just keep scrolling. You're not giving your brain that room, that you're not giving your mind that room to actually understand what you just read or watched or listened to. There's something the French mathematician and theologian Blaise Pascal, he said something that is so interesting. He said, and I quote, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Close quote. Now, just think about it for a moment. All of our problem stems from the fact that we cannot just sit alone in a room and be quiet. Think about it. Think about it. What if you dedicate one evening, no social media, you're just thinking, examining your thoughts, processing those ideas. There's something that happened to me, I think yesterday. I decided to go for a walk and in the evening, and I picked up my earphone and I wanted to plug into Spotify to listen to Jim Rohn, one of his lectures. As I walk, I would just be listening to him. And another thought just came to me like, why should I do that? Let me just stay with my thoughts and process my ideas. And it made a lot of difference. It made a lot of difference. So, if you want to be a good thinker, if you want to change your life, you must be able to be alone with your own mind without immediately reaching for distraction. Because your phone, the moment a notification comes, it hijacks your attention. And in the world as we know it today, it is driven by attention. Whatever has your attention has your life. Whatever that has your attention has your life. So if you want to liberate yourself from the distractions of the world, then you must learn to sit by yourself with your thoughts. And because there are some ideas that you have got to wrestle with. Ideas that you have got to wrestle with. Number two, the second thing that makes good thinking possible is silence. Silence. We are always bombarded with noise. If it's not from our environment, it's from our environment within. Always just sit still, sit down and sit still and think. Sit down and think. When I mean silence, I'm not talking about the absence of noise, of course. Uh, I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about the presence of inner tranquility, the presence of inner quiet. Somebody asked me a question one time, and the question was, how can I read in a noisy environment? And one of the things I told the person is, I can read anywhere I am. And the big difference is not that the environment is noisy. Sometimes, in fact, the major problem when it comes to not being able to think in a or concentrate or focus in a noisy environment is the noise within us. That is what really stops us from thinking as we as we ought to. It is not the noise outside, it is the noise inside. And as the saying goes is, it is not the water outside the boats that sinks the boat, but it is the water inside the boat that sinks it. So that principle applies also in cultivating our minds through good thinking as a means of changing our lives. So it is not the noise outside that is distracting you to read, but it is the noise that you've internalized that is stopping you to think or even read. So you need to practice stillness. And if there's anything the Bible always talks about is be still, be still. The Bible always talks about being still because stillness is the launch pad to meditation or thinking. It is the launch pad, the pad where you launch to deep thoughts, right? It's the part to. So one of the things you can do you can practice scheduling silence as a precondition for intellectual work. You can just in the evening around 7 to 6 or 7:30 to 8 o'clock, I'll just be by myself. I'll be still and I'll think. I'll try to hold a great thought, a great idea. I'll try to hold it in my mind and wrestle with it and milk it in every way possible to come up with something that can actually change the trajectory of my life. So the third one is unstructured time. What makes good thinking possible? Unstructured time. Now, thinking cannot be fully scheduled, no matter how. Okay, I want to think. It's not something that you can absolutely schedule, and you must realize that thinking is an activity of the mind, and it is as essential as sleeping. It's as essential as eating, because thinking is the way you fine tune your mind. As I said earlier, thinking is how you fine tune your mind. Thinking is how you prepare your mind to actually incubate ideas that can birth great things. The masses do not think, so they are being programmed. That is why one of the movies I love so much is the Matrix trilogy, especially the first part. It says a lot about thinking. Like, everybody is in the matrix, and a certain kind of life has been assigned to you, and you just live that life. You don't know that there is a real life outside of that life. That is what happens. In fact, that is what is happening today. People are living in a matrix, so to speak. Like, metaphorically, people are living in the matrix. People are not actually living their life. They are not owning their mind. They don't own their thoughts. It is given to them and they just think it. But if you want to break out of the matrix, if you want to move out of the grid, there's a certain way you must own your thoughts. You must own your thought. You must own your thoughts. And sometimes owning that thought means that you must schedule it into your everyday life, into your everyday activity. It's one of the most important activities you can ever engage in. The way people sometimes I wish the way people take going to the gym so seriously. I wish they can take going to mental gym seriously. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. So sometimes between the day, or maybe you're standing in a queue, you went to the bank and you're waiting for your turn, or you're at the ATM machine, you're waiting for your turn. Engage your mind in vigorous thoughts. It should crack in like it. Now, thinking or meditation, I see it as the same thing. Thinking and meditation, the same thing, because it's actually fine tuning your mind. You're actually holding a particular idea and you're wrestling with that idea. You're thinking in a particular pattern to produce something. It's either to heighten your understanding, or to enlighten your mind on a particular thing. The thing is just that the more we engage our mind in meetings or even on social media, the less we will think. That is why, as people use AI more and more, they become more stupid and dumb. Yeah. Just imagine the world by 2050. What will happen to the human mind? What will happen to the human mind? Because people are every day, thousands and millions of people, billions even, outsourcing their thinking to AI. They're outsourcing what makes them human. They're outsourcing their minds to. There's something I wrote in my book, Deep Reading. Let me read it. I said, smartphones have become a big part of our lives, and they are not inherently bad. The problem is that we have allowed it to hijack our minds so much so that we find reading difficult to engage in. And this is precisely why reading has become a challenging task. Reading, essentially, is about buying back our minds to engage in thoughts that shapes us and makes us human. Thinking is one of those activities that makes us human. So not to think is to dehumanize yourself. And that is what we are leveraging. That is what we are outsourcing to AI. You're technically dehumanizing yourself. The fourth thing that makes reading uh, possible, good thinking possible rather. The fourth thing that makes good thinking possible is the role of boredom. A lot of us don't want to be bored. I know sometimes, I know, I've been there. Yeah, I've been there. But boredom is actually good. Do you know what boredom is? Do you know what boredom is doing to you? Now, when you're bored, most of the times that is the time you can actually come to original thoughts. Boredom is the mind signaling you that it is understimulated and beginning to generate internally. So when you're bored, it is a sign that you should engage your mind, not something outside, but something inside. But the problem is, we immediately, once we are bored, we try to find something to do to, overcome the boredom. And it seems that boredom is an enemy that needs to be overcome. Boredom is a demon that needs to be cast out. But boredom is actually one of the building blocks to a thinking mind. So when you're bored, the next time you're bored, don't try to reach out for something to make yourself on board, but it is a signal for you to go still, engage your mind in a particular thought, and you think that thought, you hold that thought in your mind until you come to a conclusion that can actually change the trajectory of your life. So don't suppress boredom. Embrace it. It will transform your life. It will transform your life because what becomes available to the mind that is willing to be bored would it would change your life, right? So when you're bored, whatever you make available, not to suppress the boredom, but as a means to maximize and leverage the boredom, it changes everything. It changes everything. Now, it changes everything. Now, let's come to the last part. There's a part I wanted to speak on, but we are almost out of time. We're almost out of time. Let's talk about forms of thinking worth cultivating. Maybe maybe we'll take that. We'll take that, or I will just include it in the study notes that I'll be posting on my WhatsApp channel. If you're not following the WhatsApp channel, check the description of this live stream. You get the link to join or to follow me on to follow the WhatsApp channel. I'll post it alongside. I'll just add it. I'll just add this part of forms of thinking worth cultivating. So let us go to the last part in this lecture today. Reading as a fuel of thinking, right? That's what we want to talk about. Reading as a fuel of thinking. Now, thinking requires materials. Thinking requires something that is quote unquote something that is external to foster your thinking. And if I think in the first or second lecture I said something in this line. Reading is thinking through the author's thought. So when you pick up a book, you're actually leveraging on the author's thoughts to clarify your own thoughts. And I want to read somewhere in my book, deep reading. I want to read somewhere in my book that I said something in this line. I said deep reading does something remarkable to our minds. It is one of the few activities that requires us to sustain complex thoughts over extended periods, to hold multiple threads of an argument simultaneously, to entertain perspectives radically different from our own, and to build intricate mental models of ideas, characters, or worlds. So that is what reading is. Reading is a fuel. Reading is a fuel. It helps us in our pursuit of knowledge and truth as a means to living the life we want. So quickly, reading is what stocks the mind with the raw materials that thinking transforms into understanding. And there's something Timothy, the Apostle Paul, uh, wrote to his mentee Timothy. He said, "Think over what I say, for the Lord will give you understanding." I love that. I love that line. I love that line. Yeah, because it's a principle. Think over what I say, for the Lord will give you understanding. So that is what thinking gives you that platform to understand things that you read. Do you get? So if you read whatever you read and you don't engage in the act of thinking, you'll never come to an understanding. That's just how it is. So every thinker must be a reader, and every reader must be a thinker. And here's why. Number one, reading without thinking produces information without understanding. Reading without thinking produces information without understanding. And that is what many students that we know. That is just it. They just have information. You go to your lecture hall and you just listen to the lecturer. You don't understand anything. See, when you come to an understanding, it means one thing. It means that idea has become a seed that can grow into a tree and produce fruits in your life. And information that is not understood is useless. That's just it. Number two, thinking without reading produces intensity without substance. Thinking without reading produces intensity without substance. So we don't just want to think, we want to read. And we don't just want to read, we want to think. There are two sides of the same coin. One cannot do without the other. One cannot exist truly without the other. So you must be a reader, you must be a thinker. You must think to understand what you read. I must read to think better. Right? So the mind can be spinning on its own. Like a mind that is spinning on its own is limited by experience. It's on its own experience. But when you read and you think through what the author has said, you're actually leveraging on the author's thoughts and the author's ideas, right? You're thinking through it. You're laboring through what the author has written in the book. Number three, the two activities are not sequential. They are simultaneous. It's not like you read, then you think, or you think and you read. No, they are not sequential. They are simultaneous. They are interdependent. Like I said, one cannot do without the other. They go in a simultaneous way. Like they are almost the same that sometimes they are almost how will I even put it now? They are so interdependent sometimes it almost seems as if it is the same thing, but it's not. It's not. Now, another thing that makes reading powerful. Another thing that makes reading powerful is writing. If you truly want to be a thinker, if you want to change your life through the things you read, the notebook is your laboratory of thoughts. It is where you dissect ideas, you tear them open, you operate on ideas to see how they can turn into something. It's your laboratory, your lab. It's your lab, right? Your notebook is your lab. So you cannot be a thinker and you don't write. You cannot call yourself a thinker and you don't write. Because writing is one of the ways you clarify your thoughts. Writing is one of the ways you give flesh to your thoughts. Writing is one of the ways you make sense of the things you think about. Writing is thinking made visible. The notebook is where reading and thinking intersects. It is the place they rest. It is the place they meet. The difference between a notebook, now somebody will be asking, okay, but I journal. The difference between a notebook and a journal is a notebook is not a record of feeling. A journal is a record of feelings. Why your notebook is a record of your ideas. There's a saying, ideas rule the world. It is true. When you have an idea and you execute those ideas, it changes your life. You cannot be thinking like the masses. The masses don't have ideas. They don't. Or even if they have, it's ideas that was passed down to them and they cannot really execute those ideas. But when you generate ideas from your own self and you execute those ideas, it changes your life. It changes everything. It changes everything. It changes everything. The question is, what should you write? When you pick up a book and you're reading the book, you should write down questions that arises as you read. question that arises as you read. Let me show you something from my own study. I'm actually writing inside the book. Okay. Here's the question. I read something about beliefs holding us back, and there's something I wrote in the margin, and I said, "What do I doubt that is holding me back?" That's the question. So that's the question that came to my mind as I was reading this particular paragraph, and it will foster my own idea of it will foster my thinking because I'm writing them down, and the more I write this thing down, it it sticks to my mind. It sticks to my mind. Another thing to write about is you know connections to other ideas. Ideas, according to Mark Zuckerberg, ideas are not fully formed. So sometimes one of the ways these ideas become fully formed, or at least to an extent, like they are well developed, is you connect them to other ideas that you know, so ideas that you've come up with. Another thing you should write about you should write is objections to objections you want to develop. Objections you want to develop. Something like goals or something like that you want to develop. Then another thing is tentative conclusion you are not yet ready to commit to. You read something in a book, and the author is giving you a conclusion from it, the premise. If you watch the last lecture, the author is coming to a conclusion, and you don't really agree with it, but it's something you want to consider. You write them down. That's something you can write. There's a lot you can write down, but these are some of the ones you can practice. Then you need to practice something I call slow writing along slow reading, or should I say deep writing along deep reading. Deep writing along deep reading. Let me please get this book. And I'm also thinking of writing a sequel. Like, okay, I'll not call it a sequel, but I'm thinking of writing a companion to this deep writing. I'm not yet sure of the subtitle yet, but deep writing. An idea came to my mind today as I was thinking. I should write a book called Deep Writing. Maybe to talk about how to use writing to change your life and how to change other people's life through writing. How to engage your mind through writing and how to engage other people's mind through writing. I don't know. I might write a book like that maybe later this year or so. If it's something worth doing, I think I'll commit myself to it and I'll do it. But the point is practice slow writing or deep writing and alongside slow reading or deep reading. You know, it's there's a YouTube video I watched recently. We should come back to the practice of writing essays. And when you say writing essays, I'm not talking about even writing with a device. Write with pen and paper, particularly blue. It does something to your mind, actually. It does something to your brain. So practice slow writing alongside slow reading. Practice it. Don't be in a hurry to write down ideas. Sometimes if an idea comes to you in your mind, sometimes don't be in a hurry to write it down. If the idea is really, really worth it, if it's a good idea, it will come back to your mind. Yeah, I've done it. It's something I've practiced again and again. Sometimes a thought will come to my mind, maybe when I'm in the bathroom or when I'm cooking or doing the dishes. Sometimes I'm compelled to just pick up a pen and write it down. But sometimes I deliberately not write it down to see if this idea is a good idea to come back to me. Right? So practice. Now there's something called the compound effect. There's something called the compound effect that when you engage in it will, you know, if you're just starting to practice, if you're just starting out to practice good thinking, it will not you not just become good at it. That is why you should study good thinkers, people that have cultivate good thinking. People like John Maxwell, people like uh, Pascal Pascal Bassi. I think I am not pronouncing that correctly, but he's a good thinker. You can this thing. Then Ludwig Wittgenstein. You can also listen. Then there's somebody I discovered recently, Richard Frodlord. I don't think I pronounced that correctly. Emerson, Leonardo da Vinci, even the Apostle Paul reading your Bible, King Solomon. These are good thinkers. You can actually engage. Can learn from them. Can learn from them. I mentioned something about the compound effect. Now, if you practice good thinking over time, there's a book I would recommend. Thinking for a Change by John C. Maxwell. You should read that book. I think you should read that book. It teaches you how to think. Yeah, it teaches you how to think. And while I was preparing for today's lecture, there is a thought that came to my mind. I should turn this lecture series into a book. I should expand it, and I should expand it. I don't know if it's something you would like. You can let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments if it's something you would like turn this the life of the reading and the life of the mind as a book. If you like that, if you like to read this lecture, like an expanded version of it, well researched and maybe including a lot of stories of deep readers, please let me know in the comments. Now, let me close with this. A mind that reads widely and thinks carefully accumulates not just knowledge. They don't just accumulate knowledge, but they build cognitive tools or skills, like those whose mind or those who read widely and think deeply, they make their minds into instruments of thought that can be applied to any new problem. And the future that we are now, this I would say this is kind of like a prediction. The future that we have entered, the future, it's not yet too obvious, but the future that we have entered is a future where your ability to think, and to produce human stuff will be one of your greatest selling advantage. Just being able to think critically, it will change, it will help you to earn in the nearest future. So you need to be preparing yourself in light of that. As AI is increasing, as the demand for AI is increasing, human intelligence is declining. So if you're part of those people who cultivate their mind, who build their life of the mind, you build the life of your mind, you build it to an excellent level that your mind is very, very sound, very, very sound. It will make you a lot of money in the future. Yeah, it will make you a lot of money in the future. So because you're able to think and to solve problems that even AI cannot really do that, especially in one-on-one human relation. So the thinker at 50, right? The thinker at 50 who has read and reflected for 30 years does not merely know more than they did at 20. They think differently. That's just the truth. They think differently, more precisely, more originally, and more freely. I can say that of myself. The things that I know when I was a teenager, and the things that I know now in my late 20s, they are almost the same thing, but the way I think is totally different. The way I think, that's why sometimes I can say, not that I don't know this thing, I know this thing, but something have changed, like because of the way of thinking has changed, but the knowledge or the things I know the same, but the pattern of thinking or the habit of thinking change. So I want to leave you with I want to leave you with something before we call this session, today's lecture, a close. Now, when was the last time? It's a question. When was the last time you had a thought that was genuinely your thought? It was genuinely your own, not borrowed from a podcast, not inherited from your upbringing, not absorbed from people around you, not recycled from something you read. Like, when was the last time a thought was originally yours? A thought that arrived because you sat quietly. When was the last time you had that kind of thought? You sat down quietly long enough and you pushed hard enough. You wrestled with that idea. You wrestled with that thought. You milk it and stayed in the difficulty, like the difficulty of understanding that idea. You stayed there long enough for something new to emerge. When was the last time? When was the last time? If you cannot remember, that is not a failure. It is not. But it is an invitation. Because the capacity for original thought is not reserved for the specially gifted. No, it's not for the elite. It is for you and I. God gave us, each and every one of us, a mind. A mind. And He expects us to cultivate this mind and to put these minds to use. So that is what I want to leave you with today. That is what I want to leave you with today. So thank you for your time. Thank you for this session. I don't know. Let me leave a room for, if you have any question, you can drop it in the chat. I'll see it and I'll answer those questions.